My designation is Vel-Kor, Supreme Commander of the Sovereign Collective, and I have conquered 43 star systems. 43. Not that I was counting or anything, but the historical records are quite comprehensive. I have personally overseen the subjugation of species ranging from the crystalline-based life forms of Tau Ceti to the gaseous cloud entities of the Andromeda sector. I have stared into the void and made it blink first. I am without question the most formidable military strategist in the known galaxy. So naturally, when my tactical officer informed me that we had detected a primitive planet with nothing but simple bipedal creatures and surprisingly advanced yet nonsensical technology, I laughed. Actually, I did more than laugh. I made that peculiar sound that humans call a guffaw, which I would later regret profoundly. Earth, they called it. How delightfully unimaginative. Our reconnaissance probes had gathered considerable data. The inhabitants bipedal, carbon-based, bizarrely fragile, barely possessed the capacity for interstellar travel. Their military vessels were laughably undersized. Their energy weapons operated on principles that seemed almost quaint, and yet, there was something perplexing about their behavioral patterns. They took unnecessary risks. They acted without logical calculation. They seemed to operate on something they called emotion, which our xenopsychologists described as a critical vulnerability. Perfect. This would be the easiest conquest yet. I assembled my war council aboard the dreadnought Sovereign, a vessel so immense it could block out the sun of an entire solar system. The conference chamber hummed with the presence of my most trusted officers, Strategos Keshval, my tactical director, Commodore 3, commander of our fighter squadrons, and Science Minister Volt Ash, our lead xenobiologist who possessed an admittedly irritating habit of suggesting there was more to study before committing to invasion. The humans possess a global military infrastructure estimated at approximately 7,000 active conflict vessels, Keshval reported, his three eyes scanning the holographic displays that rotated before us. However, their tactical doctrine appears fragmented. They maintain numerous independent command structures rather than unified coordination. Weakness, I stated, nodding with satisfaction. Possibly, Voltash interjected, and there was that tone again, that cautious, annoying tone. However, their survival rate in planetary catastrophes remains statistically improbable. They have survived 4 extinction-level events. They have recovered from civilization collapse scenarios at least twice. They have even weaponized their own biological vulnerabilities. Irrelevant. I dismissed his concerns with a wave of my primary appendage. We attack with overwhelming force. Their fragmented command structure means no unified defense. They will capitulate within solar cycles, possibly hours. Thrin's mandibles clicked in what I interpreted as agreement. The human population centers are concentrated in predictable coastal and river locations. Orbital bombardment would neutralize 94% of their military capabilities within moments. And the rest? I asked. Scattered resistance, easily handled by ground forces. It was all so beautifully simple, almost too simple, which should have been my first warning. But arrogance, it seems, is not exclusively a human trait. We initiated our descent toward the planet's surface within the hour. The approach was uneventful, which I should have found suspicious. The humans made no aggressive gestures, no fighters scrambled to intercept us, no defensive protocols were activated. They simply watched. Our sensors detected increased electromagnetic activity, but nothing threatening. Keshval suggested they might be attempting communication. Patch it through, I commanded. Static. More static. And then, a voice. Female. Surprisingly clear for primitive technology, and was that amusement in her tone. Well, this is unexpected, the voice said. Flight command. Did we authorize a visitor day at the Pentagon? Who are you? I demanded, my patience already thin. Captain Delilah Voss, United States Air Force. And you are? I am Vel-Kor, Supreme Commander of the Sovereign Collective. You are about to witness the final moments of your insignificant civilization. I expected fear, panic, desperate negotiations. Instead there was that sound again, laughter. The human was laughing at me. Supreme Commander, huh? Delilah Voss said. Well, that's adorable. Listen, you seem like you've got a whole thing planned here. Big ship, scary threats, the whole invasion package. But before you start getting committed to this particular course of action, I feel obligated to give you some friendly advice. And what advice could a primitive possibly offer? I asked, though something in her tone unsettled me. Hold my beer, she said. The transmission cut out. Keshfil's eyes rotated in confusion. Commander, what does that phrase mean? I had run the linguistic database already. Hold my beer. It was a human expression, typically preceding an action of dangerous and questionable judgment. It was not a surrender phrase. It was not a peace offering. It was something far more ominous. Launch the orbital strike, I ordered. Wipe out their primary military installations. All strike craft away, Thrin confirmed. Our weapons fired in the perfect geometry of absolute superiority. 47 missile strikes, targeted at the Pentagon facility, the military bases across their nation, their missile launch sites and command centers. I watched the impact signatures bloom across the planetary sensors, brilliant flowers of destruction. When the dust settled, literally and figuratively, our scanners indicated military capability reduction of approximately 88%. We had performed admirably, predictably, inevitably. Then the human's voice returned through our communications array, and everything began to go wonderfully wrong. Okay, so you got your big satisfying boom, Delilah Voss said, her voice disturbingly calm for someone whose military infrastructure had just been catastrophically damaged. That's got to feel good. Really reinforces that whole unstoppable force narrative you've built for yourself. But here's the thing about humans that your xenobiologists probably didn't adequately emphasize in their little files. Speak human, before I decide your planet is beyond salvage and unnecessary, I commanded. We're stupid, she said. Not all of us, but enough of us. Specifically with a kind of stupid where destruction doesn't deter us. It motivates us. You just destroyed what, exactly? Military installations, concrete and steel, and people we had already figured were probably going to die anyway. You want to know what you didn't destroy? I remained silent. I was beginning to suspect I would not enjoy this answer. You didn't destroy our innovation. You didn't destroy our rage. And most importantly, you really didn't understand what you were attacking. See that military infrastructure you're so proud of obliterating? That was our weak option. We showed you the hand we wanted you to see because we were genuinely hoping you'd be the type of species that would see overwhelming power and back down like rational creatures. But you're not, are you? Enough words, I snapped. Initiate ground invasion. Eliminate all resistance. As I watched our dropship formations descend toward the planet's surface, I noticed something disturbing. The human detection networks were not attempting to shoot them down. They were simply tracking them. Observing, anticipating. It was precisely the moment when I should have reconsidered everything, should have pulled back, should have examined our assumptions. Instead, I watched our landing bays open and our ground forces deploy across the continents of a planet that was apparently about to teach me that size, strength, and superior firepower were not synonymous with victory. Delilah Voss's voice crackled through the communications array one final time before signal disruption became total. Now things get interesting, she said. The dropships completed their landings, and then humanity showed us exactly what we had been underestimating. Our lead assault group, comprising 3,000 soldiers equipped with plasma technology and force field generators, encountered the first human defensive line approximately 4 kilometers from their landing zone. I observed from orbit through tactical drones, expecting swift annihilation. What I received instead was education. The humans did not meet our forces with comparable weaponry. They had something far more effective, terrain knowledge. They had spent millennia understanding every valley, every ridge, every underground tunnel system of their world. Our soldiers advanced through what appeared to be open ground, and suddenly the entire landscape transformed. Detonations erupted in geometric patterns. Not random explosions but calculated strikes designed to funnel our troops into kill zones. The humans emerged from underground positions we had not detected, wielding weapons we had not anticipated, advanced kinetic projectile devices, electromagnetic pulse generators, and something they called napalm, that seemed to burn with unnecessary enthusiasm. Thryn watched the battle indicators with growing alarm. "Commander, we are sustaining 23% casualties among the assault group." "Acceptable losses," I said, though something was beginning to crack in my confidence. "Continue the offensive." "The humans are coordinating," Voltaire observed with what sounded like genuine scientific interest. "They are utilizing asymmetrical warfare tactics. They are not attempting to match our firepower direct. They are using environmental factors, psychological operations, and what appears to be spontaneous unit-level decision-making to negate our technological advantage. They are primitive creatures operating on instinct," Keshval said, but even he sounded uncertain. This is when Delilah Voss herself appeared in our communications feed. Not just her voice this time, but her image. She was standing in what appeared to be a military command center, and she was wearing a flight suit with insignia. I learned indicated she held authority. "So Vel-Kor, we should probably have a conversation about your expectations," she said, "because I'm sensing you're not getting the results you were anticipating. Let me share something with you about my species that your data files apparently failed to grasp adequately." She paused, and I swear I could see satisfaction in her expression. "We are not governed by logic alone. We are driven by purpose. And right now, our purpose is making sure your species understands that conquest looks substantially different when the conquered population refuses to accept the premise of their own defeat. You are all going to die," I stated flatly. "Probably," Voss agreed. "But so are you. That's the part that's going to surprise you. We will kill you with our bodies, our machines, our wills, and our overwhelming capacity to continue fighting even when every reasonable metric suggests we should surrender. And we'll do it with a smile on our faces, and a sense that we're doing something important." "This transmission is terminated," I said, and I ordered it cut. But the damage was done. The seeds of doubt had been planted. Within the next 72 hours we discovered what doubt could accomplish when introduced into the calculations of a superior military force. Our ground forces encountered resistance in every zone, every sector, every unexpected corner of their world. The humans used biological warfare, deploying disease vectors against our troops. They used cultural warfare, broadcasting messages to our soldiers designed to demoralize and confuse. They used economic warfare, somehow accessing our supply lines and disrupting our resource chains. But most devastatingly, they used something we had not adequately accounted for: adaptation. Every tactic we employed, they countered within cycles. Every weapon we deployed, they engineered countermeasures for. Every strategy we implemented, they predicted and undermined. It was as if they possessed a fundamental advantage we could not quantify or eliminate. Keshval's analysis eventually revealed what it was: flexibility. Humanity's greatest weapon was their capacity to think laterally, to accept failure and learn from it, to make decisions without waiting for hierarchical approval. Our military, efficient and powerful though it was, operated on absolute command structure principles. Every decision descended from my authority. Every soldier waited for orders. Every strategy was centrally conceived and implemented uniformly. The humans? They operated as though every individual possessed authority. Every soldier made tactical decisions independently. Every unit commander adapted strategy based on circumstances. It should have resulted in chaos. Instead, it resulted in a form of coordination that was somehow more effective than our rigid hierarchy. On the 7th cycle of combat, I received a priority communication from Thryn. Our forces had suffered 40% casualties. Our equipment was becoming unreliable. Our supply lines were completely compromised. "Commander," he said, his voice hollow with something that might have been defeat, "I recommend we consider tactical withdrawal." I wanted to refuse. My pride demanded it. But something deeper demanded I make a strategic recalculation. Delilah Voss appeared on my communication screen without me even requesting the connection. She had somehow hacked our secured military channel. "I imagine you're experiencing what we call clarity right about now," she said. The moment when you realize you made a series of assumptions that didn't align with reality. How's that feeling? I am still in command of the most powerful military force in this sector, I said, though the words felt hollow. Sure you are, Voss agreed, and we're still the species you intended to eliminate. So here's what happens next. You have two options. First option, you continue this conflict, and we continue bleeding you dry until your forces are completely neutralized. You'll win the war militarily, but you'll lose everything doing it. You'll return to your collective as a failure, and whatever military power you have left will be insufficient to hold your territory against your political rivals. I said nothing, but she continued. Second option, you listen to what I'm about to tell you, and you actually hear it. What is it? I asked. We don't want to fight you, Voss said. We wanted you to leave peacefully, but since you decided on the invasion route, we needed to show you that your assumptions were wrong, and we've done that, so here's the deal. You withdraw your forces, you leave our planet, and in exchange humanity will give you something far more valuable than conquest. And what would that be? I demanded. Knowledge, Voss said. Real knowledge about adaptation, innovation and survival. Because Vel-Kor, your species has everything you need to dominate the galaxy, everything except the capacity to think like prey, and we specialize in that skill set. I stared at her image on the screen, this small, fragile human with her ridiculous optimism and her infuriating certainty that she was right. And for the first time in my lengthy military career, I realized that she might be. I retreated to my personal quarters aboard the dreadnought Sovereign, which is precisely what a superior military commander does when confronted with inexplicable setbacks and deteriorating tactical situations. Retreat to contemplate, strategize. Definitely not panic. That would be beneath my station. HFY found me staring at tactical displays showing casualty figures that seemed to increase faster than my medical corps could process them. 42,000 soldiers lost. Equipment worth more than several planetary economies reduced to scrap metal. And for what? A planet that refused to surrender despite possessing no logical reason for continued resistance. The human has requested direct negotiation, HFY announced. Captain Delilah Voss. She claims she is authorized to speak on behalf of their entire civilization. Shall I instruct her that you are unavailable? I could have done exactly that. I could have maintained the facade of supreme authority, the appearance that this setback meant nothing to my grand strategic vision. But something in me, something that predators develop after centuries of evolution, recognized a predator in Voss's tactics. She was not trying to destroy me. She was trying to teach me. And that was somehow more terrifying. Accept the negotiation, I commanded. Full visual transmission. Let her see me. Moments later, Delilah Voss materialized on my communication screen. She looked worse than she had previously. There were bandages visible beneath her flight suit. Her left arm was in a medical sling, but her eyes possessed something I had not encountered before in any species I had conquered. Understanding of what was actually happening in her world. Vel-Kor, she said, nodding with what appeared to be genuine respect. Thank you for accepting. I wasn't certain you would. You have something to say? I asked, refusing to acknowledge the peculiar sensation of being treated as though I were a peer, rather than a supreme authority. I do, Voss confirmed. First, I want you to understand that what happened here wasn't a victory for humanity. It was a lesson. We suffered catastrophic losses. Our military infrastructure is devastated. Millions of our people are dead or dying. By any reasonable measure, this was a disaster. Then why do you smile as you speak? I demanded. Because the disaster wasn't the outcome, Voss explained. The disaster was almost the outcome. If your first assault had succeeded, if your firepower had simply obliterated our defensive capabilities in one overwhelming strike, we would have been extinct. But you gave us time, Vel-Kor. You gave us cycles to adapt. You treated us as though we were too primitive to be a threat, and that assumption saved our entire species. She leaned forward on her screen, and I noticed her hand was trembling slightly. Not from fear, I realized. From exhaustion, from the weight of commanding people through survival. Your species operates on absolute hierarchy, she continued. One supreme authority making decisions that cascade downward. It is efficient. It is powerful. It is also fundamentally inflexible. Your soldiers cannot make battlefield decisions. They cannot adapt without authorization. They cannot innovate because innovation requires accepting failure. And humans thrive on failure? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. We thrive on survival, Voss corrected. Failure teaches survival. Your soldiers were magnificent warriors facing circumstances they were not trained to handle. Our soldiers were adequate warriors trained to handle anything. That is the difference. I absorbed this information, allowing it to integrate into my understanding of tactical doctrine. It was uncomfortable, challenging, almost insulting, but undeniably accurate. You came here to offer knowledge, I said, recalling her earlier transmission. What knowledge could you possibly possess that would interest the sovereign collective? Voss smiled. It was not a smile of victory. It was a smile of someone who had survived something impossible and emerged changed by the experience. How to lose, she said simply. How to lose and continue fighting. How to fail and learn from it. How to accept that your enemy might be right about something and adjust your strategy accordingly. How to lead people not through absolute command, but through shared purpose and mutual trust. How to turn a species that should have been extinct into a species that can stand against any invader and negotiate from a position of equality. You offer lessons in subjugation and defeat? I asked incredulously. I offer lessons in survival, Voss corrected. Your collective is vast, Vel-Kor. You have conquered 43 civilizations, but I suspect you have not kept any of them. Conquered territories become rebellious territories. Subjugated species become resistant species. But allies, species that choose to follow you because they respect you rather than fear you, those become permanent. I stood, my multiple appendages flexing with agitation. You suggest I abandon the principles that have made me supreme commander. I suggest you expand your principles, Voss said. Keep your military dominance. Keep your tactical superiority. But add something new, the capacity to recognize when you are wrong, and the flexibility to adjust course. That is not weakness, Vel-Kor. That is transcendence. Before I could respond, alarms screamed throughout the dreadnought sovereign. HFY's voice erupted through the internal communications system with urgent clarity. Commander, multiple human missile launches detected. Origin points are distributed across at least 40 different continental locations. I should have been surprised, should have felt betrayed. Instead, I laughed, genuinely laughed, because I finally understood what Voss had been demonstrating. Cancel the red alert, I commanded calmly. Raise the communications channel to the human fleet. Commander? HFY's confusion was palpable. Do it, I ordered. Voss appeared on my screen again, and this time there was genuine amusement in her expression. You were testing me, I said. Those missiles, they were never intended to strike the dreadnought. You were demonstrating that you still possessed the capacity for deception, that you were not offering surrender, but partnership. Exactly, Voss confirmed. We needed to know if you could recognize deception and respond with flexibility rather than retaliation. If you had immediately retaliated against those missiles, this conversation ends here, and we return to conventional warfare. But you didn't. You paused. You observed. You adapted. You have destroyed my military's infrastructure, I said. You have slaughtered my soldiers. You have humiliated my authority before the galaxy. And now you expect me to simply accept this as a learning experience. No, Voss said. I expect you to understand that this was mutual. You destroyed our military installations. You killed millions of our people. You threatened our entire civilization with extinction. But we both survived the conflict fundamentally changed by it. That is not humiliation, Vel-Kor. That is transformation. Commodore Thrin appeared in my command center, his expression reflecting deep confusion. Commander, I do not understand your orders. The human missiles are approaching strike parameters. Should we not initiate countermeasures? No countermeasures, I said. Allow them to approach. Then raise a full communications channel to all human military vessels. Broadcast this message across all frequencies. The Sovereign Collective recognizes the military capability and tactical sophistication of the human species. We declare the conflict concluded by mutual recognition of strength. Thurin's multiple eyes rotated in astonishment, but he obeyed. The missiles continued their approach, and then precisely 43 seconds before impact, they detonated. But not against our vessel. They exploded in perfect geometric patterns around the dreadnought, creating a spectacular light show that could be observed from the planet's surface. A celebration, I realized. Not an attack. A demonstration of precisely targeted control. Statement that humans could kill us if they chose, but instead they were offering something far more valuable. Respect. Delilah Voss's voice crackled through the communications array one final time. Welcome to the alternative, Vel-Kor. This is what cooperation looks like. Over the following solar cycles, the transformation was remarkable. I withdrew the Sovereign Collective's remaining forces from Earth's surface. But I did not simply retreat. Instead, I established a permanent diplomatic and scientific presence. Voss and I began weekly communication sessions where I documented her civilization's tactical philosophy, and she studied my own military doctrine. What emerged was something neither of our species had anticipated: synthesis. Military strategists from the collective began training with human commanders. Scientists from both civilizations collaborated on new defensive technologies. Cultural exchanges established foundations for genuine understanding. The collective's High Council was, predictably, skeptical when I returned to our primary stronghold and presented my analysis of the failed invasion. You were defeated, Council member Strathvel stated bluntly. And you now propose we form alliance with the species that defeated you? This is madness masquerading as strategic brilliance. I was not defeated, I corrected carefully. I was educated. There exists a difference. The human species possesses capabilities that complement our own. Their adaptability compensates for our rigidity. Our organizational structure provides them with efficiency they currently lack. Together we become something greater than either of us could achieve separately. The collective does not ally with species we have conquered, another council member interjected. We dominate and extract value. This is our way. And this way has resulted in 43 conquered civilizations that resent our rule, I countered. Civilizations we must garrison extensively to maintain control. Resources dedicated to maintaining suppression rather than generating innovation. Humanity offers an alternative, genuine partnership where both parties invest in mutual success rather than one party exploiting the other. The debate continued for hours, but eventually pragmatism won. The collective's economic analysts calculated that alliance with humanity would generate substantially more value than subjugation, and military strategists recognized that humanity's adaptive capabilities, when directed toward mutual defense rather than internal rebellion, would strengthen the collective's position significantly. Within 3 months, formal diplomatic relations were established. Within 6 months, the first joint military exercise occurred above Earth's atmosphere. Within 1 year, humanity held seats on the Collective Strategic Council, and within 2 years I received a communication that surprised even me. Captain Delilah Voss was being decorated with the Collective's highest military honor, the Sovereign Star of Command, an honor previously awarded to only 7 individuals in the entire history of our civilization. The ceremony occurred aboard the dreadnought Sovereign, with Voss standing in full dress uniform while collective dignitaries observed. She was smaller than me in all physical dimensions, weaker by any direct measure of physical force, and yet, when she stood on that ceremonial platform, she possessed a presence that eclipsed every admiral and general present. Captain Voss, I announced formally, you are hereby awarded the Sovereign Star of Command in recognition of extraordinary military leadership and your species' magnificent capacity for adaptation in the face of existential threat. As I placed the award on her uniform, she looked directly into my primary visual sensors and smiled. Thank you, Commander Vel-Kor. Though I should mention, this all could have been avoided if you had simply listened when I said, hold my beer. The assembled dignitaries were uncertain how to respond. I, however, understood the reference perfectly. It was a statement about confidence, about willingness to demonstrate capability, about believing in yourself so completely that you could invite an observer to witness your competence without fear of failure. It was, I was learning, remarkably human. As Voss left the ceremonial platform, HFY approached me with something that might have been amusement reflected in his facial features. "Commander, I must confess something," he said quietly. "When you first ordered the invasion of Earth, I calculated our probability of success at 98.7%. And now I calculate that probability at less than 1%, HFY admitted. This troubles me. It means I misunderstood the variables fundamentally. This bothers me greatly." "Perhaps," I suggested, "that is the most important lesson we could have learned. That certainty itself is the greatest vulnerability, that the universe contains variables we cannot calculate because we have not yet imagined them. That species like humanity exists to remind us that victory is not always the outcome of overwhelming force, but sometimes of overwhelming will combined with surprising flexibility." HFY processed this information for a long moment before responding. "You have become influenced by human philosophical thinking," he observed. "I have been educated by it," I corrected. "There is a difference. Now come. We have strategy sessions to conduct with the human military advisors, and I am informed that Captain Voss has prepared something she calls a celebration beverage. Apparently, it is tradition to consume it during moments of successful alliance formation." As we departed toward the diplomatic meeting chambers, I reflected on the peculiar nature of military conquest. For cycles, I had believed that power meant the capacity to impose my will upon others. Victory meant their submission and my dominance. But Earth had taught me something different. Power, true power, meant the capacity to transform enemies into allies. Victory meant creating situations where both parties benefited from mutual cooperation. Dominance meant leading others toward purposes they chose to pursue rather than purposes imposed upon them. It was not the philosophy I had held for 3 centuries of military command, but it was, I was beginning to suspect, substantially more effective. That evening, as I stood in the observation deck of the Dreadnought's Sovereign and looked down at the planet called Earth, I thought about a small human female with a damaged arm and exhausted eyes, who had somehow convinced a supreme commander of the most powerful military force in the galaxy that surrender could sometimes be victory in disguise. And I considered the extraordinary possibility that the universe's greatest strength lay not in absolute power, but in the humble recognition that you did not possess all the answers, and that species vastly different from your own might be precisely what you needed to become something greater than you had ever imagined. The human called it learning. The collective called it adaptation. I called it the day I lost my arrogance and found something far more valuable in its place: understanding. Somewhere on Earth below, Captain Delilah Voss was probably telling this story to her friends, adding dramatically exaggerated details about how she had single-handedly convinced an alien commander to reconsider his invasion strategy, through nothing but confidence and a clever phrase. Which was, I was learning, a very human way of immortalizing victory. And somehow I found I did not mind at all.